If you thought 2020 was a tough year and you can't wait for it to be over, well, we're sorry to tell you that 2021 doesn't look any more promising. In fact, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize has been warning global leaders that the world is about to experience a famine of biblical proportions. Meanwhile, in the United States, the number of food-insecure households is fast expanding. The reliance on food banks keeps increasing, and pantries are completely overwhelmed by demand. In some cities, people line up for over 12 hours to get enough for only a couple of meals. In addition to this devastating hunger crisis, lockdowns are expected to get even more strict by January 2021, jeopardizing the survival of struggling businesses and prompting another wave of layoffs. However, the worst part of it is that while some will be able to comfortably sit in their homes and follow the new social distancing restrictions, others who've been left without a source of income are on the brink of eviction and could become homeless. We might be approaching the 2020 end line, but that doesn't mean things will get any easier in 2021. That's exactly what we're going to expose in today's video. So stay with us. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel to keep updated with the next unfoldings of the economic collapse. This year, after lockdowns were enacted around the world, wealthy countries experienced several hardships, often seeing years of economic and social progress being wiped out in the time span of a few weeks. However, poorer countries have been tremendously affected by the total or partial shutdown of their economies, and an alarming share of their populations are already dealing with a dire hunger crisis. And in the face of a second round of lockdowns, their situation could become much worse. This is what David Beasley, the head of the UN World Food Programme and winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, has been alerting to global leaders. Touched by the success of the program, Beasley affirmed that one of the biggest advantages of having won the award was that now, instead of being given 10 or 15 minutes, global leaders would allow him up to 45 minutes so he can get into detail about the difficulties the world is about to face when it comes to hunger. He discloses how the prize has given the UN agency a spotlight and megaphone to warn how next year is likely to be worse than this year. And without billions of dollars in aid, Beasley says, we are going to have famines of biblical proportions in 2021. Beasley said this in an interview with the Associated Press, that the work the agency does every day in conflicts and disasters often puts staffers' lives at risk to feed millions of hungry people. But also it sends a message to the world that it's getting worse out there, and that their hardest work is yet to come. He also pointed out that the health crisis has not only worsened, but also generated multiple hunger crises worldwide. And even though in 2020 the situation didn't become as serious as it could have, partly because the government supplied their countries with money, stimulus packages, and the deferral of debt, the hunger crisis was only averted for the time being, but it's far from being resolved. Moreover, with another wave of confirmed cases spreading across the globe, economies are continuing to deteriorate, particularly in low and middle-income countries, and another round of lockdowns and shutdowns will exacerbate the impacts of famine even further. That is to say, due to the adverse effects of business shutdowns on the economy, it's likely that the money that was available in 2020 is simply not going to be available in 2021. According to a joint analysis by WFP and the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, 20 countries are likely to face potential spikes in high acute food insecurity in the next 3 to 6 months and require urgent attention. Of those, Yemen, South Sudan, northeastern Nigeria, and Burkina Faso have some areas that have reached a critical hunger situation following years of conflict or other shocks, and any further deterioration in coming months could lead to the risk of famine. The UN agencies reported. Beasley revealed to be very concerned that with deferred debt payments for low and middle-income countries resuming in January, plus new lockdowns and the ravaging economic consequences, 2021's going to be a very bad year, he said. According to WFP estimates, nearly $15 billion would be necessary to avoid a tragic hunger crisis next year. $5 billion just to avert famine, and $10 billion to continue executing the agency's global programs, including for malnourished youngsters and school lunches, which are often the only meal many children can get. Although the hunger problem, fortunately, hasn't hit the same level compared to these countries, the fact that one of the world's most powerful nations is also registering disturbingly high rates of food insecurity, especially amongst children, is still worrying. In the U.S., the number of vulnerable households is escalating amid unemployment growth and the absence of federal aid. For instance, in Maryland, where it was registered a 400% increase in applicants to the federal Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps, after unemployment skyrocketed as a result of shutdowns in March. Local news reported that the state is indeed experiencing a hunger crisis. Schools have been trying to reach out to low-income children, providing school breakfast programs to at least help the kids to get food. The rise in Maryland's childhood hunger stressed how breakfast programs in schools are more needed now than ever before. For every 100 low-income students, about 62 are reliant on school meals to be able to eat. Low-income families are becoming increasingly dependent on government programs and food bank assistance to get the supplies they need to feed themselves for a week or two. Now that the holiday season is approaching, thousands of unemployed workers are waiting up to 12 hours at drive-through food banks. This is what's been happening in Texas, where, in the hope of getting one of the 7,000 frozen turkeys that the main distribution center is providing ahead of the holiday festivities, tens of thousands of cars have been lining up outside of the pantries. Last Saturday, Dallas's North Texas Food Bank held a distribution event that gave away over 600,000 pounds of food given away, including 7,000 frozen turkeys. The organization said it hopes to have given enough food to feed around 25,000 people. Photos of the event show that to attend demand, it was necessary to split the cars into 4 different lines. NTFB spokeswoman Anna Kurian said the turnout demonstrates that the need for food has certainly increased in the state, saying 40% of the folks coming through our partners' doors are doing so for the first time, she told CNN, which means many who managed to stay afloat until recent months have been progressively facing financial difficulties. In Texas alone, nearly 3.8 million people have filed for unemployment relief since March. The state's unemployment rate remains more than double what it was at the start of the year. According to the Texas Workforce Commission, the state's unemployment rate in September was at 8.3%, marking an increase from 6.8% in August. Economists say this surge is an example of how some industries that had hoped to overcome the health crisis-induced economic recession have not yet been able to do so, and have instead just informed they'll be letting go a large number of employees by the end of the year. On the same note, a recent report has found that states that were hit the hardest by food insecurity this year are the same that used to suffer from this issue before the economic meltdown had started. Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana, and New Mexico are recording even higher rates, with places such as Jefferson County, Mississippi, presenting the highest food insecurity rate in the country, approximately 30.4%. However, the recession disproportionately affected other states such as Nevada, which jumped from the 20th to the 8th highest food insecurity rate by state. Craig Gunderson, a renowned professor in the Department of Agricultural and Consumer Economics at the University of Illinois, explained that in areas like Nevada, which has a strong emphasis on the service industry and tourism, there will be substantially higher rates of increase in food insecurity than in areas with fewer service sector workers. Furthermore, some of these jobs may not come back. Tourism may be permanently down in the United States, so these impacts could also have longer-term ramifications. Also known for its celebrated touristic attractions and its iconic hospitality sector, the once imposing New York City's economy has been destroyed by the mandatory business closures that ended up in permanent closures and were translated into more layoffs. According to Feeding America, the nation's largest hunger relief organization, about 11% of New Yorkers already struggled putting food on the table in 2018. But this number is expected to hit 19% by the end of this year. Even after a vaccine is approved and largely distributed, it'll still take a while for the food crisis to end as well. The city's food pantries are totally overwhelmed. A new study found New York wasn't prepared for a food crisis of this magnitude and this duration. Emergency food programs were always intended to be a temporary solution, said the professor at the CUNY School of Public Health, Nicholas Freudenberg. He says, especially when the demand has gone up so much, the capacity of that temporary solution to meet the need is even less so. And so I'm concerned that the city has not come up with more sustainable solutions to keep up with the increase in food insecurity. Likewise, the volunteer coordinator at Project Hospitality, Gloria Novoa, highlighted that many of those that have recently become food insecure in the state are part of a new demographic of the working class that she calls the working poor. Novoa outlines that in February these people would never imagine they would fall into poverty, and now that's their reality. This is one of the reasons why approximately 300,000 New Yorkers have moved out of the city over the past 8 months. According to the New York Post, 295,103 city residents filed change of address requests from March 1st through October 31st. The actual figures are projected to be way higher, since a single address change could represent an entire household. The cost of living is being cited as one of the main determinants that are prompting people to leave the city. Also, as of January 1st, the CDC moratorium is lifted nationwide, and those who have missed rent payments are at risk of eviction. The investment bank and global advisory firm Stout has forecasted 11 to 13 million renter households could potentially face eviction filings by early next year. Housing analysts are alerting that if the CDC moratorium is allowed to expire without a replacement protection, a tsunami of evictions will emerge. We're not out of the woods in terms of a huge wave of evictions in our country with the kind of rent debt that people owe, said Michael Trujillo, staff attorney with the housing program at the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. In short, while the global elites are talking about a great reset, our economy will continue to deal with a great meltdown, as the Center for Disease Control is warning that massive evictions will create a homelessness crisis of unprecedented proportions that could put 10% of the American population at risk of losing their homes. The consequences of leaving its citizens unemployed, hungry, and without a home will certainly trigger a lot of turbulence in the U.S. streets in the coming months. 2020 was just the beginning of the collapse, and we will still be seeing the impacts of this catastrophic crisis for a long, long time. If you found this video informative, you will also enjoy Michael Snyder's book, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, now available on Amazon. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section down below. We thank you for watching.